Strap in for another exciting episode of TacticalPay Radio, a weekly show where we interview firearms industry professionals and experts, from gun manufacturers to world-class competition shooters, from Second Amendment advocates to marketing gurus. If it impacts firearms or the firearms industry, we cover it with in-depth interviews here on TacticalPay Radio. Hey everybody, welcome back to TacticalPay Radio. I'm your host, Brett Grayson, and this is the podcast where I get to talk to professionals in the firearms industry. I've got a fantastic show for you today. Joining me is a representative from the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and that's a nationwide advocacy and watchdog group of physicians and other health professionals. The DRGO educates health professionals and the public as well in the best available science and expertise about firearms, including gun safety and preventing injury and death through wise use and lawful self-defense. And so joining me today is Dr. Sean Brodale. He's a family practitioner in Iowa, and he advocates for the right to carry in hospitals for eligible medical personnel. I can't wait to ask about that because I find this subject to be really interesting. These are some of the most educated people in our society, and even they can't agree on the policy about guns in hospitals. So we'll get to that in a minute. At DRGO, he is involved in membership and public engagement projects. And fortunately for us, that includes coming on to an excellent podcast like TacticalPay Radio. Dr. Brodale, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brett. It's great to be here with you.
And it's okay if I call you Sean.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, well, you've taken it upon yourself to be an advocate for the Second Amendment. I assume nobody is forcing you to do this. Is that fair to say?
No, somewhere deep inside me is forcing me to do this, but it's all inside myself, yes.
Of course, yeah. Well, of course, I have to ask because you already work full-time in what is, in my opinion, it seems to be a high-stress job. Being a family practitioner, that's not easy. And so you've now taken up as your cause outside of work, Second Amendment advocacy, and that's also a labor of love. And so what made you decide to dedicate yourself to this cause? Did you grow up around guns?
Well, I guess I grew up around guns a little bit. You know, my friends hunted a little bit. I went hunting with my friends and their dads here and there. In the household, I can't say we really had guns, although when I talk to my mom, she says I always had to have some kind of gun. I had cap guns when I was really little. I always had to have a BB gun as I grew up. And then my dad did buy me a rifle when I was 16, which I target shot, stuff like that. But it wasn't a real big gun culture. It was here and there, kind of scattered. I think I got mostly interested deeply into guns in the Second Amendment after I got out of med school and residency, and one of the docs that taught me in med school encouraged me to listen to The Bulletproof Mind. I watched that series of videos, and it just impressed me that this is something that I've got to do. And I looked into medicine, and what does medicine say about this? And all I got is anti stuff. And I said, oh no, I have got to do something about this. And so I started looking around, and I actually ran into DRGO on the internet, emailed a little bit with them that way. And then one of the things that DRGO does is we speak at the Second Amendment Foundation's yearly conference. And I heard Dr. John Adine, who is one of the membership leaders. So I called them up, and they said, let's get together and let's work on this. So I got involved, and it's been a labor of love ever since.
And that was about 3 or 4 years ago?
Yes, that was 2015, I think, that I heard Dr. Adine, and then I've been to the Gun Rights Policy Conference every year since then with them.
Oh, wow. Dave Grossman was the name you were looking for.
Right, Dave Grossman. Man, I can't believe I couldn't remember that name. Again, it's too early in the morning, I guess.
That's right. For our listeners who are listening to this at night, this is live. We're broadcasting live. And if you're in the morning, it's also live for you as well. So it helps if you think that this is a live broadcast. It's more engaging. No, but you're right. Okay, so this wasn't something that you set out to do in med school.
No.
It was early in your career once you graduated. Was there no singular event that sent you looking for an organization like the DRGO, or was it just the book?
Well, it was that. And then kind of about that same time, we had an incident in our hospital where a guy was sneaking into the hospital, trying to get into the drug cabinets. And there was a big incident about that, even though he never really got to anybody. There was never any personal contact, but there was a big fear that what if he grabbed a nurse and said, unlock this thing? What if he would have been armed? And so there was a big thing about security in our hospital. And so all this is happening at the same time. And I said, here's our problem. You don't let guns in our hospital. This guy could have walked in here with a gun. Those signs on the door wouldn't have stopped him. We need to be carrying guns. I carry my gun every day and I have to take it out every day when I get here. So we should be carrying guns. And I put it to the medical staff and they were kind of iffy. Most of the medical staff in a small rural hospital probably carry guns or hunt or something like that in Iowa. And so they were not totally against it, but they weren't sure how to go about it. But the director of the board happened to be someone from Chicago and at that time was very anti-gun. And he really shut the whole thing down, even though there were at least 3 people on the board that were willing, a police officer, a bank owner who allowed guns in his bank, and another one of the board who were actually kind of for it, but going with the majority, they went with everybody. And so that too kind of sent me into, I've got to do something about this. We went to the local media, we had town meetings, we did a lot of stuff, but still the board had the final say and they said, no, we're not going to allow guns in the hospital. And since then, I've just trying to find other ways to make that more possible. I have found a couple of hospitals do allow guns in their hospital, but even those ones that don't have no gun signs at the front door, still what I found is they restrict their employees from having guns. So there's still
Sure, yeah.
There's still that restriction.
Even in Iowa, it's so hard to implement laws that are gun friendly. If Iowa can't figure it out, then what hope do other states have? Or am I overthinking it? Is Iowa not any different than California or Massachusetts?
Oh, Iowa is certainly on the pro-gun side and getting better and better, every year. Like with different places that rate the states on how well they are on guns, we run about mid to better than average 14 or 15 or something like that. I don't remember this last year.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certainly states that are better. I grew up in Utah, and the state of Utah really has some pretty strong laws. And one of the things is no state organization, entity of any kind can restrict carry of weapons for their concealed carry holders. So that means the state hospital, the University of Utah, has to allow firearms on their property and by everybody. The beautiful thing is it's been like that for like 15 years. Nobody's even noticed, and there's never been an incident.
Does that register? When you speak with the board and you have these debates, was there reasoned discussion and did you guys hash it out totally? Or was it they looked at it and much like the Speaker of the House will look at they'll look at a bill and they'll just decide whether or not it goes to floor? Was it more like that where the board just said it's not up for discussion? How did it play out?
Well, they did kind of not want to discuss it very much, which is why I had community meetings and we brought the community together, and then they rushed out with all of the anti-gun pediatricians that were there. Those were the anti-people, mostly the 2 pediatricians. And they came out with all their usual, oh, that's scary for us. Oh, no, being in a hospital is a stressful situation. So someone's just going to shoot somebody just because they're arguing with them, all of this stuff. And I said, well, let's look at the University of Utah. They've been doing it for 15 years. They're like, well, that doesn't matter to us. They're somewhere else. That doesn't mean anything to us.
Did they have any points that resonated with you? Something like, well, we already have paid security on site, and so why do we need more people armed? We've already got guards. Is that the best point that they could make?
No, because we have no guards. We're a small rural hospital with no guards. When things happen and I'm there doing rounds or I work a lot of ER, actually I went full-time a year or 2 ago, I'm the guard.
Oh, wow.
And so, because I'm the one male among all the nurses there, once in a while there's a male paramedic, but most of the time, most of healthcare is females. And so you get a lot of that. But even now, I talk to a lot of individual people, and most of them really think it's a good idea as long as we get some training, as long as we get some other things. And there's a lot of training programs out there now for schools with all the mass shootings and stuff that there's been in schools. And they get a lot of news coverage, even though it really is a very small percentage of homicide or other injury with guns. But you get all of that, and more people are seeing that we should arm our teachers, and there are people out there who train it. One of those is Buckeye Firearms and their FASTER program. And I think we could do something like that for hospitals so that people could feel like they are better trained and they are trained in that situation. If there was a active shooter, or I really have to train myself to say an active killer, because I'm an active shooter. I shoot all the time. So when there is an active killer, I think we could train hospital staff. I think there's plenty of hospital staff out there that would like to do that, just like there are more and more teachers and staff in schools who want to do that, and more places, more school districts, more state legislatures are allowing them to do that.
I think that's a great point that you make, that the semantics do matter. If you say active shooter, it doesn't put an image in someone's mind like if you say a homicidal maniac. And then the point gets across much clearer. Or like you said, an active killer. If you say active shooter, it evokes this image of someone randomly shooting, all right, just like firing in all directions. But if you specify they're here to kill, then it provides some level of a motive and purpose. And I think it's important. But the important battles is just getting started, taking on bad policy. And that's what you did at the hospital that you do rounds at. And it sounds like you've spoken at other hospitals and talked to a lot of doctors. Is DRGO covering all 50 states?
We kind of do. I don't know if we've looked at, do we have members or do we have active people in every state? Specifically, we have a website and we have a blog there, and we do lots of different interviews and stuff like NRA TV and different independent podcasts, radio shows. Dr. John Adine has done a lot of different podcasts and radio shows. He seems to be the most active. He's one of those people that just loves to talk to everybody.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, you guys have a lot of members. The website is drgo.us.
Yes.
And for any listener that wants to go check out all the contributions, and you don't just do podcasts like this one. Part of your public engagement is also writing the occasional column. It's really a well-written article, and I don't want to say just a blog entry, because this is something you put a lot of thought into. And one of the most recent columns was about the Journal of the American Medical Association. And you take them on and say that they're publishing junk science. And I wanted to ask you about this because I didn't even know JAMA took on political issues. Is that typical for them, or did they make an exception for the gun rights debate?
Pretty much. They don't do a lot of political stuff, exactly, but they do for the gun debate. And they really publish stuff that you look at that science and you go, really? Where did this come from? There's nothing about science. They decided it was going to come out this way, and they tailored the study so that it would come out this way. And if you related it to medical science and came up with that same kind of information, all of the physicians would be going, are you serious? That doesn't mean anything. There's no real, there's some kind of association out there, but there's no way you can come close to saying this causes that. And there would be an uproar. But when it has to do with guns, so many of them out there just say, okay, yeah, guns are bad. So any study that comes out that says guns are bad must be true, despite the fact that it's poor science. And many of the physicians who are pro-gun don't want to say anything, because the people that are anti-gun are those people who are high up in those associations, and they don't want to get in any trouble. They don't want to have trouble with their board certification or things like that. I know a lot of people who don't want their name said, but they'll still help us. I have a good friend who doesn't want to do anything, put his name out there, but he certainly will help us write. And there are a number of physicians who write under a pen name, basically, so that the people around them don't know that they're pro-gun because it would affect them professionally.
It's just so unfortunate that politics over an issue that is really settled by the Second Amendment. I mean, there's no going back. We're not going to take out the Second Amendment. There is a right to bear arms. And it's just unfortunate that so many doctors, they're so hesitant to ruffle feathers that they just don't want to have their name associated with an issue that really shouldn't be too controversial. You know, guns are a part of this nation's history. And I think just so many people now grow up in an environment absent of guns that they just assume the worst motivations because they don't know any better, even though we're talking about the most educated people in our society. And so, but it is good to hear that a lot of doctors come up to you on the side, it sounds like, and they say, hey, you're fighting the good fight, but don't say my name, but keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, and we get a lot of background support, so that does help, but it would be nice if they didn't have to hide.
Of course. Just curious, did JAMA publish anything that represented your side? Was it balanced?
No. The only things that have been good, the American College of Surgeons has published a number of, is there 2 or 3 studies that have been pro-gun, well, I won't say pro-gun, but shown that concealed carry laws actually don't cause more crime, or having a gun in your house really doesn't cause you to be at more risk for being injured by a gun. Things that have been out there in the left kind of media for so long, and they're starting to do some studies. And one of the leads investigators in these studies is a member of DRGO.
Oh.
And we're so glad to have him doing those studies, and they're actually getting published. So some other big journals are doing it, but journals like JAMA and New England Journal of Medicine and stuff like that are still very anti-gun.
My next question is, do you feel like you've been able to make any headway? Is there any signs of progress? Is there any accomplishment? Is there any policy that you did successfully get implemented to make hospitals safer?
At the moment, on my local level, I don't think so. I think I've maybe changed some minds. Speaking back about the director of our board came to me a year ago and said, hey, would you take me out shooting? I bought a gun and I'd like to learn how to shoot. And, he says, I've shot a pistol before years ago, but I would like to learn. And I took him out and we shot and got to talk a lot. So even that person that I thought was totally anti-gun has gotten turned around a little bit. Apparently his son is very pro Second Amendment, very pro self-defense, and has turned that head around just a little bit. He's starting to see our side. So things happen, and sometimes things have to happen slowly, especially when you change the hearts and minds of people. That happens slowly. So we have to just keep working with people, dealing with people on a very personal basis, one-on-one, little by little, showing them that we're not, quote, gun nuts. We just want to defend ourselves, our communities, and this nation. Having everybody know how to use a gun, having firearms is about, and knowing it's not just about hurting other people, it's about defending ourselves, defending our family, defending our communities, and defending our nation.
Absolutely. The most important part about the right to carry is that it acts as a deterrent. And I think that's the hardest argument to make, because you can't quantify how many crimes were prevented by the deterrent of knowing that that doctor might be armed. So it does deter would-be criminals. Are there instances that you know of? I mean, there must be, of violent crime happening at a hospital that may have been prevented, or at least could be preventable if better laws were in place that enforce the right to carry.
Right. There's one I can think back, Dr. Lee Silverman back in Boston, and I think that was probably 2016. He's a psychiatrist, and a mentally disturbed patient came in, and Dr. Silverman and I think the social worker was with him. The guy pulled a gun and actually shot the social worker, and I think wounded Dr. Silverman. He was able to get to his gun that he was not supposed to have there and stop the shooter. Now, the biggest thing is you could say, well, this guy just wanted the doctor and this social worker. The guy had over 200 rounds on him. That would have been a mass murder if he wouldn't have stopped him. Now, he did it also against the rules.
He didn't lose his license or his board certification.
He didn't lose his license. It didn't appear that there was anything that he lost his privileges or anything there. And he certainly did not talk about that after. But we can see that right there stops something in progress. Now, deterrence, the University of Utah, it's a big hospital. It gets referrals from the whole Western states, especially their pediatric hospital there. And they have had absolutely nothing happen for all of these years where they've allowed guns in there. There's got to be some kind of deterrence. There have been other instances of people coming in with firearms in other hospitals in the valley there, the Salt Lake Valley, where the University of Utah is, but nothing there at the biggest hospital where the most patients come. And I think it's definitely a deterrence. You can't prove that, but you got to look at that and wonder.
Sure. Yeah. And there must be so many other instances. Of course, I can't expect you to recall them at the drop of a hat, but I'm encouraged that you had that experience with your coworker about his son, essentially flipping him, because otherwise the only way to convince people is for a tragedy to occur. And then in the aftermath, you have to figure out how to prevent it again. We don't want that.
True.
Like I said, I'm encouraged by the stories like the one you just said. Are there any upcoming events or articles or anything we can look forward to from the DRGO?
Boy, there's just ongoing stuff. We publish articles 2 or 3 times a week usually. There's some recent interviews on NRA TV, some of our other physicians. I'm not sure when those are going to be published. And there's just ongoing things. The biggest thing is to watch the website, read our articles, and look into the white papers and the other information that we have there, more than just the regular articles that we do. But there's stuff about hearing protection and the Hearing Protection Act of 2018, was it, that never went anywhere, just like the concealed carry reciprocity that didn't go anywhere. But we've put into those things and put in our opinion, and all those things come out on drgo.us. The biggest thing there is our 2adoc.com referral service. We like to connect Second Amendment friendly doctors with patients who don't want the doctors pressuring them about guns or guns in their house or where are your guns and are they locked up. We'd rather, if there's any conversation about guns in the doctor's office, it's what new gun do you have and can we go out shooting together? Only in the extreme situation when someone seriously is a harm to themselves or others should guns come up in any other conversation.
Thanks for mentioning that. That referral service can be found at 2adoc.com. And like you said, that connects patients and healthcare providers with people who respect the Second Amendment. And like we said off air, it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but it's the right move. This website really does help connect people who haven't lost their sense of reality. It's the Second Amendment. Its necessity was established 240 years ago, but somehow there's still a debate going on about its necessity. So that's great that you guys have put that together. And I just want to clarify that even though you and I talked about the right to carry in hospitals for eligible medical personnel, the DRGO discusses that, they cover all facets of responsible gun ownership. So just to make that clear to the listeners, DRGO covers a lot of topics, but that's the one I thought was most pertinent and most interesting.
Sure. It's my favorite subject when it comes to Second Amendment issues. Excellent.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I wish you the best. You're fighting the good fight, and you're going to be a great resource for doctors across the country, and I look forward to seeing what the DRGO can help implement, because there's a lot of bad policies in place, but it takes people like you to stand up and put their name out there. Most doctors are not willing to do that. They just want to go to work, help people, and come home. They don't want to fight a second fight, but that's what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett. I'm glad to be here with you, and have a good day.
So that concludes our guest interview for this week. As you guys know, I love talking to high-profile firearms industry folks about the business of the firearms industry. When it comes down to it, most people's day-to-day experiences with firearms is with the communities they belong to. And with that in mind, each week we ask you, the listener, to nominate a firearms group or hunting club or gun rights organization, any other related firearms community that's worthy of recognition. Then my producer, Scott Hawksworth, he puts together a segment all about them. If you have any organizations you'd like to suggest, please feel free to email Scott at TacticalPay.com. So now here's Scott to tell you about this week's Community Organization of the Week.
Hey, Tactical Pay Radio listeners. As Brett said, I am here to highlight yet another Tactical Pay Community Organization of the Week as nominated by you, our listeners. These aren't sponsored picks, rather firearms clubs, hunting organizations, and others that do great work building and engaging with their communities. This week, we are so happy to recognize the Arlington Fairfax chapter of the Isaac Walton League of America. The Isaac Walton League was founded in 1922 to conserve outdoor America for future generations. The League's 54 founders, who were avid anglers, named the organization after Isaac Walton, the 17th century author of The Complete Angler, a classic book about the art and spirit of fishing. The Arlington Fairfax chapter is located in Virginia and shares the goals of the larger organization, which are to conserve, maintain, protect, and restore the soil, forest, water, and other natural resources of the United States and other lands, as well as to promote means and opportunities for the education of the public with respect to such resources and their enjoyment. In addition to their conservation work, they offer archery ranges, shooting targets, and various events that benefit local hunters, sportsmen, and women. They do fantastic work, and so many congrats are owed to them on their selection. If you'd like to learn more, you can find them online at arlingtonfairfax-iwla.org. So that's your Community Organization of the Week. And remember, if you have any notable community organizations around firearms, hunting, shooting, and more that you think deserve a spot, feel free to email me, scott@tacticalpay.com, and let me know. We'll highlight them on the show.
Hey, thanks, Scott. And a huge thank you to you, our audience. If you have a chance, please subscribe and consider giving us a review on iTunes, as that really helps us grow the show. Stay tuned for another episode of Tactical Pay Radio next week. This podcast is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can check out some other great shows and content at selfdefenseradio.net. And lastly, if you own a firearms-related business, visit TacticalPay.com. You'll learn about how your business can benefit from accepting credit cards with the most trusted name for payment processing in the firearms industry, Tactical Payments.